The Metaphysical Poets of the 17th Century. Metaphysical. Well, what does it mean? Metaphysical is a word to describe metaphysics. Metaphysics can be defined as abstract theories or concepts. It could be anything that does or does not possibly exist. It is a common term in philosophy. Think alien space dragons, or to literally become a shelving unit. You are now a shelf, and everything placed on you is also a facility of you. You are the shelf. It is often used to attribute humanistic characteristics to inanimate objects. It does not have to adhere to reality or be tethered to reality. Metaphysics literally translates to meta, meaning beyond, and physics, meaning nature. It's a synonym for the word supernatural. Metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry describes a certain style of 17th century English poets. This style is recognized primarily for its use of conceit, hyperbole, metaphors, paradox, wit, and wordplay. Conceit is an extended rhetoric or metaphor governing a work, like a root concept, and it's kind of used as the proof of the work. Hyperbole are exaggerated statements, and they're usually not taken literally. Metaphor is a figure of speech, and it's often a quality that is applied to a noun, but it doesn't necessarily have to make sense either. And a paradox is something that's seemingly absurd or untrue, something that seems like converse, but it strangely enough could be true or is true. Wit and wordplay, the use of humoristic language or trickery in wording, how you phrase something, throwing in a joke or something. Why is metaphysical poetry cool? Well, language is always changing, and in the 17th century this was indeed the case. Poets were experimenting with different techniques and approaches to poetry. This was a new way of writing poetry, and it's noted that the style is for the intellectual, though I'd argue that anyone can derive a certain level of enjoyment from metaphysical poetry. And a fun little fact is, it's more often named or referred to than read. It experimented with mainstream ideas like romance, love, and eroticism, but it used and employed unique and newer mechanisms to the poetry, things like hyperbole and metaphors and stuff on that previous list. Metaphysical poets. The metaphysical poets as a phrase in general is reserved for a group of poets, elegists and writers of the 17th century England, and three of them are more well known than the rest of them. That would be John Donne, Abraham Cowley, and John Cleveland. John Donne, my personal favorite of the three, and whom I have one of his poetry books, and it's commented on by T.S. Eliot. It's a cool book. He was an English poet, scholar, soldier, and secretary, known for his abrupt dislocations and paradoxes and sensual metaphors. He's also well known for his satirical writing, and he often criticized things. And also, he himself was heavily criticized by his peers and then, critics later down the line of history. He was also incredibly highly fashionable. You can tell by the frilly neck thing. A poem by John Donne, and perhaps his most well-known or most referenced poem, The Flea. Mark but this, the flea, and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our two bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said, a sin nor shame nor loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Interpreting the Flea. This poem, when taken literally, is about a flea sucking the blood of one and then another. The two different bloods mix and they become one blood. This poem, however, under critique, is most definitely about sex. The blood is a metaphor for other bodily fluids mingling. And this poem is a conceit. It's a fancy or exaggerated metaphor to explain something relatively basic, and kind of summarizes the whole point of metaphysical poetry. And finally, it's humorous too. It contains like a sensual wittiness about it. Metaphysical poetry and the effects it's had. These poets pioneered a style, though not entirely new or groundbreaking. It inspired subsequent poets and poetry. Metaphysical poetry is now recognized as falling under the umbrella term of Baroque poetry. Now, this expansion includes the 17th century metaphysical poets and pioneers of that style, but it also includes writers from the Americas and other places who employed dark witticism, metaphors, hyperbole, paradox, those other motifs of the style of writing. So it's both are accurate, but I think today it's you can refer to it as Baroque poetry. And to summarize or to wrap this up, one more painting of John Donne. It is of my personal opinion that he was the best dressed poet to exist.